Welcome to the Enlighten podcast, where I am going to take you into a deep exploration of what it means to exist in this current reality. We are going to raise your vibes, open your mind, expand your heart, and dive deep into the wondrous mysteries and possibilities of this lifetime. There's been a spiritual catalyst that has set in motion the awakening process of many across the globe to return to the knowingness of self and unite what has been separated. Together, we're going to bring light into that darkness. We're going to remember the joy of living. But most of all, we're going to turn up the volume of our own eternal power and do the thing we're here to do. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Enlighten podcast. Today, I have a very exciting conversation to share with you. This is definitely going to be a sensitive topic for many of you out there. And my guest and I are going to do our best to handle this with love, with compassion, and an open mind to deeply understand the different perspectives of what feels like a very hot topic in all communities, to be quite honest. And that is about transgenderism and the role of it in our society and how everyone's kind of reacting to not just the idea of it, but also people and individuals. So I'd like to introduce you to my guest, Laina Novak-Stoppel, and she is actually a client of mine. She's in my alchemy program. And Laina is, you are transgender and you're now a woman and loving all of it. And it's been a pleasure to work with you, get to know you, and also give you an opportunity to use this platform to communicate some of your concerns, but also your perspective. And I think this is going to be a really powerful conversation for all of us. So thank you for using your voice to do all this. So welcome.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you very much for letting me have this opportunity to speak about some of these issues, which can be deeply divisive. And yes. I think as a society, we need to start coming together and discussing these issues with a little bit more nuance. Well, a lot more nuance.
A lot more nuance. I agree.
And with more compassion and kindness and respect for other people.
Yeah.
Both as individuals and their, identities as who they live as.
I think obviously I don't even know if I want to go there just yet. No, I'm not going to go there just yet because there's other things that I think are more important to start off with in talking. And, working with you, and I have a couple other transgender clients, and it's been an honor to work with you and help you on your own journey and develop a lot more of your own spiritual connection, which you seem to be growing in and feeling a lot more like you lately, which I think is wonderful. But this is going to be for my audience. I just want to kind of preface this with it. Please, when listening to this podcast or watching it, wherever you are, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or any other podcast platform, is please use an open mind, because both Laina and I are going to be challenging one another in our own perspectives from a place to really understand the other. And I think that I'm going to be using my voice to kind of bring up some of the concerns that a lot of people I think are frightened by. There's a lot of fear, and you're going to kind of use your voice to kind of represent the opposite side, but it doesn't mean that you're speaking for everyone. You're really just speaking for yourself. I'm just speaking for myself, but we're going to try to touch on all these points. And I think it's important that everyone come from a place of deep gratitude for having a conversation that's open with the intention to simply just understand one another. And this isn't about changing anyone's mind. This isn't about changing someone's beliefs. No one has to do that. This is simply about gathering information so that we can deepen our awareness and knowledge on a very, very sensitive and hot topic right now. So I'm going to actually let you steer the ship here in where would you like to kind of open up the conversation? What's most important for you to start talking about?
Okay. Well, first of all, I do think it's very important for us as a society and as individuals to treat one another as unique beings with our own unique pathways and experiences in life. So when we try to, shall we say, legislate morality, that doesn't work, because when we force our beliefs on others, it causes more trauma and more suffering, because people are individuals. And for them to be forced to give up their way of life or to flee an area in which they're being persecuted or oppressed, that's very traumatic. So it just perpetuates the cycle of division and othering other people. It's very important to stop othering other people and come together as a community and build bridges with people who we formerly thought of as adversaries. Because we definitely need to unite as one humanity in order to repair the divisions and start building a better future.
I agree. And I think one of the things that I've recently learned is that, you know, and when I say recently, I mean in the last year or so. So it's pretty new, is that transgenderism isn't something that's just kind of started in the last, 20 years or something like that. Like, this has been going on for millennia, like since ancient times. And there's quite a bit in history. You were mentioning to me, from what I understand, I know that in Atlantean times, there was quite a lot of transgenderism as well. What is your knowledge on the history of it from like beyond where we're at right now in modern time?
You mentioned Atlantis. I also remember a past life in what is commonly called Lemuria, where we had their version of transgender people. They were sort of viewed as bringing balance to male and female polarities. But yes, there is a very long history of transgender and non-binary people under different names. Like, they weren't always called trans and non-binary.
Yes.
That's modern terminology.
Yeah.
But the first recorded historical incidents was in ancient Sumer, where a lot of priestesses of the goddess Inanna they were called Gala, which were generally either effeminate male or transgender women who served as priests or priestesses of Inanna. And then there are, obviously the two spirits in indigenous societies. There are the Hijras in India and South Asia. And they were basically found all over the world. And commonly they are, or were, in some instances still are, regarded as very spiritually connected individuals who are meant as sort of like an in-between role or a balance bringing role. Sort of, okay. Yeah, like that.
Yeah. And I thought that was very interesting. I think that's really interesting to note, because I think one of the big kind of beliefs, and I say very generic beliefs that is kind of dominating a lot of the different conversations, is that this is all caused through some sort of, I don't know, hormonal imbalance in our food, in our water, environmental effects, which I can't say I disagree with totally. I think that that's a possibility. You can't rule that out in any way, shape, or form. But I don't think it can possibly be, the one big thing that's going to answer the whole problem. And I shouldn't even say problem, because when I refer to problem, is what I mean is like people trying to understand where this is, kind of originating from. And I think that, you mentioned to me, and while we were chatting before we kind of hit the record button here, is that you've learned also that something happens during the gestation period.
Yes. So there is a biological aspect to transness. Aside from the soul being feminine, and that's a whole other topic that needs to be addressed. But in terms of purely biology, I know that, and again, I'm not a neuroscientist, so forgive me if I get like the certain facts wrong, or just, but I have read and heard facts that, so in the womb, there's at a certain point in the gestation process, there is a certain burst of hormones. And depending on whether we get that or we don't get that, I think that's what I heard. But it's depending on one of those two options, our neural physiology, our brains tend to wire themselves in a way that is contrary to our chromosomes and our biological gender.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, our brains tend, there's a lot of plasticity when it comes, especially in the womb, when it comes to the wiring of
brain, like the neurons in the
yes.
brain. Yeah. So basically you're saying whether or not you get this burst of hormones release, and again, we're not quite sure if it's, the burst causes the rewiring to be very different than what it would normally be, or if it's the lack of. But what happens is there's a rewiring within the brain that is very specific to people who are transgender and people who are not.
Yes, that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, I get it. And just to the audience, this is a really big deal for Laina to be here and communicating and using this platform to share her voice. And so there's definitely going to be some nerves, and I totally get it. This is a big deal. And anytime we're sharing our truth, there's a lot of nerves. I mean, just when I first started my YouTube channel and I started speaking about spirituality and all of these things that I thought people were going to call me a total quack for, which they did. Some people did, and it's okay. Like you can't escape that. You can't escape other people's beliefs and how they're going to perceive something. But this is a big deal for you. And so a lot of forgiveness here. And I just think compassion more than anything for you just taking your time to find the right words. I, think that there's so much to this conversation, because while, there could be a hormonal thing that happens outside, like maybe through food, water, something like that, or something that actually happens in the gestation phase of the womb when the mother is pregnant, or, like I also believe though that, in some cases, and this isn't all cases, and this is the thing, and we've got to understand, there's no like smoking gun. There's no one pill answer to this conversation. It's very nuanced. There's a lot of different layers, and not everything's going to apply to just, you can't just cast a blanket over this and think it's going to be like the full answer and it's all right. Obviously we had Beverly on the channel like about a year and a half ago, where decided after starting to transition, did not want to transition and wanted to go back to her original body. And there's that happens as well. And so there's also a lot of trauma that can confuse and create a lot of dysphoria within the body. And I know that me growing up, I was very much dissociated from my body as a female. I wished I was a male. I wish I'd been born a boy. It would have made my life so much easier. And now, this topic was never an issue around that time. But I'm in a way, I'll be honest, I'm kind of grateful in a sense that it wasn't being, how do I say this? Because I think sometimes these topics are pushed into areas they shouldn't be pushed in just yet. Like there's certain development and skills and awareness that people need as they're growing in order to really understand everything. And so for me, it took me a long time. It took me until almost my 30s to start really embracing my own femininity. And then I was so glad to be a woman. Now that doesn't mean for everyone. There are people who've transitioned and are so happy with their new body and it feels right for them. And it's like, it's very life-changing. And so there's so many different things that we have to understand about this whole journey. And it is very still new in our society. We're still trying to really understand all the different layers. But the only way we're going to understand is if we actually have these conversations without coming from a place of triggered, trauma, or also feeling the need to make the other person see your point of view, or you need to see it my way, or you need to believe my beliefs, like that is where I think a lot of the breakdown comes down, because it's okay if maybe you, Laina, see something from one perspective and I see it from another, and maybe you hold a certain belief and I hold a different belief, and that's okay. That doesn't mean that we can't get along and that, we can't communicate with one another or like one another, like that's what being an individual is, which is what you're saying is such an important part of this whole process.
Exactly. And you mentioned you experiencing dysphoria growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And that definitely brings home my point about individuality, because we're all individuals and not everyone who transitioning won't be right for everyone who experiences dysphoria. It was right for me.
Yeah.
And I did a lot of soul searching to come to the realization that transitioning was something I needed to do. But at the same time, there are people who experience dysphoria who, don't end up transitioning, or they detransition. And that's okay, because we're all individuals and we all have our unique paths in life. And as long as we don't force transition on anyone who psychologically may not be ready for it.
Yes.
Then I think
and have like a protocols and all of that in place to protect the person, so that they're, because I think what we've learned is that a lot of the and I don't know if this is the case for all, like, doctors and all that, but there seems to be a lot of leniency in how someone is able to go about their surgeries. Is that fair to say? Or
my experience, I think my own experience living in British Columbia in Canada, I think it was a pretty good sort of protocols around diagnosing and transitioning. But I have heard stories that, in a lot of places in America, it's a lot more lenient, and it can lead to a lot more problems down the road.
Okay, so there kind of needs to be a standard of practice, so to speak, that across the board. And truly, it's to protect the person. Like that's who should be protected the most, so that, they are truly making the best decision for themselves going forward. And there's not going to be, you can never prevent it 100%, but to really try to mitigate the issues that could come up of regret later down the road, because this is a very permanent change. This isn't just like, oh, let me get a tattoo and maybe I'll remove it later and I might have a little scar, but it's not a big deal. Like this is a very permanent change. And so I support anyone needing to do what they need to do to feel more like themselves. It doesn't have any impact on me for an individual to go through that. Where I think some of the impacts that come in that I have an issue with, and I'd love to maybe have this conversation with you, is this idea of transgender female in female sports. Because even though it's not just about your biology, there's so much more to this in how your journey is unfolding, but there is still a biological component, and there's certain things you can reduce, you can change a little bit, but you can't fully 100% change. And as a woman who's, especially I've been an athlete my whole life, I would have an issue with competing against someone who's a transgender female. I feel like that should be a separate entity of competition. What are your thoughts on that? And can you share with the audience just how to kind of move through that topic?
I mean, well, first of all, to be fair, you would probably beat me in any competition because I'm like, but then I am not the athletic type.
Yeah.
It is very true what you're saying about people who have gone through biologically male puberty. They tend to have an advantage in stature and musculature.
Mm-hmm.
And hormones can reduce musculature, but they cannot reduce stature. And I think a lot of us have seen the scenes of like, for example, like MMA fights where a transgender competitor has, beaten a biologically female competitor to a bloody pulp. And I don't think that's right. I think that there should be standards involved. Like, so if you transition before puberty, then, and again, that is a very thorny issue in itself, because a lot of people have major objections to that.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, there are a lot of people who are at risk of suicide if they don't transition. A lot of young people. So again, very complex and thorny issue, and there are two sides to every story.
Yep.
But I do think there should be more standards in sports. And again, there is a lot of variance within gender, in terms of stature and musculature and all that stuff. So obviously, certain biological females are going to have an advantage over other biological females just because of their inherent biology.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And
a lot of biological females are going to be able to beat a lot of biological males in sports, just because there is as much variance between gender as there is within gender. But it is also statistical trend that biologically male people who went through puberty, they do tend to have more of an advantage.
Yeah, which makes sense, because I've studied health all my life. I was in university studying kinesiology. Sciences has just been my passion. I went into massage therapy college, which, up in Canada, it's a very different program than anywhere else in the world. We have to go through extensive training that is like double, if not triple, what anywhere else in the world is. And sometimes quadruple, because I know that in the States, if you want to become a massage therapist, 500 hours, and not all states, but in a lot of states, you're good to go. I had to go through over 2,000 hours. And a lot of that was studying a lot of the physiology and the biology of the body. And I'm very interested in that on my own. I just love studying it. And I know how important hormones are to our overall health. Hormones are so important to your moods. Hormones are so important to your recovery, from just the basic things of if you've been to the gym, and your muscles need to recover, your hormone levels are important to that for healing. That it's a big thing. And so, and just because you're biologically a female or biologically a male, like, doesn't mean that you've got like it all figured out in your body. Like, we have all different ways of, genetics can play a role, belief systems can play a role, diet can play a role, lifestyle can create a role. There's so many different factors, but it's like, I think one of the big issues is because this is just how it is in media, just how we see it in our world is the squeakiest wheel gets the oil kind of. So is whoever's screaming the loudest is going to get the most attention. And unfortunately, we have the loudest of the extremes screaming the loudest because they're in such polarity to, all of these issues. And so they're really the ones who are truly triggered, and not really interested in understanding the depth of what this actually means. And so, unfortunately, we're going to get, like, for instance, like I said to you, I tend to lean a little more conservative, but I have very libertarian kind of views. I have some liberal type of views, but I tend to overall lean a little more conservative. But like I said to you, I'll never identify as a conservative just because I don't believe in the stupid label. And I just believe that the labels are what actually is part of the problem. And so, and I just want to be me. I just want to have my own, belief systems, and just, this is who I am. And again, we're all going to evolve and grow. Some of my belief systems have changed over the time, and so I think that what happens though is that you get a certain label that then gets all of these belief systems attached underneath it. And this is exactly what you're going to believe if you're this person and you put this label on you. And that's where a lot of the breakdown, I think, is happening in our society, because, everyone's scared to break their identity with that label.
Exactly. And, conversely, my politics tend to lean a little more to the left.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to identify with every position 100% that the left takes, because there are nuances, and there are a lot of problems that people think a one-size-fits-all solution applies to. And that's, again, this goes back to our point about individuality. Because people are individuals, we need to stop applying hammers, like sledgehammers to problems, and start applying scalpels. Because these are nuanced topics, and these are nuanced issues that affect different people differently. So, if, again, belief systems are very complex and influenced by one's own individual experiences and perceptions and filters.
Absolutely.
Yes. And I
don't mean to interrupt you, but just even taking it to a very, just take it away from even the whole transgender conversation. Okay, I believe in aliens, and the reason is because I've had communication, I've had something show up in my backyard. So no one can take that experience away from me. No one can tell me they don't exist, because they do. Now, someone else can believe that they don't exist because they've never had, communication or physical interaction with one. So that is to be completely understood. Cool, but it goes across the board. You can't change someone's experience, and you can't tell someone that how they should experience something, it's how you experienced it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what I was going to say, is, speaking to your point about aliens and stuff, we need to keep our reality bubbles permeable. We need to be a lot more open-minded to different perspectives and also different experiences, because it's how we grow as people,
Mm-hmm.
and as a society in general.
I love that you said that. That's a beautiful statement that you just said, that we need to keep our bubbles permeable, that we live in. And I think that's important because, I mean, it doesn't mean that you just let anything in, like everyone's got to have their own set of boundaries, and that's going to be uniquely different for everyone. But you need to have some level of permeability and malleability in how even your bubble is shaped, like maybe it is this perfect round bubble, but maybe it's not. And I think that is where a lot of growth is stunted in our human experience, is when we get too rigid in our belief systems and our viewpoints, that we don't, stay open enough to know that maybe I'm missing some piece of information that would help me understand something on a deeper level that I'm not really understanding. And I think that's where this all, at the end of the day, the common denominator in all of this is fear, right? Fear is the common denominator. And so what is it that we fear? We fear what we don't know. And so if we don't know something, we're going to like start screaming and pounding, pushing, like punching things like, no, 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 no. And it's just because none of us want to confront what we don't know because it's not comfortable. And so within the human experience, and this is something all humans can relate to, is that we all have difficulty facing the unknown.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And this applies to the transgender topic as much as any other topic.
Yes.
And that's why I think this conversation is such an important one to be had, because when we get to know other people who maybe have different experiences or perspective or lifestyles than we do, then we tend to humanize them and stop dehumanizing them, which is the source of a lot of problems in our society, and historically the source of a lot of problems as well. Demonization, dehumanization, never a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Exactly. So let's kind of go back to the topic of biology, because this is something that, you brought up, and how, just saying like how that's not the only thing. So why don't you discuss or share with the audience how like you don't want to be reduced to just your body?
Well, in terms of, this gets into what I was talking about earlier with the soul, as well as the way the brain is wired. So transness has a biological component, but it also has a mental and spiritual component. Now, not everyone is going to believe in a soul, obviously, but I do. And I, looking back through my past lives, most of them have been female. That is my preference.
Okay.
Um, and I think in this life, my soul chose a path of transitioning simply because, well, for personal reasons, it seems to have healed a lot of personal trauma that I had, um, in terms of like suppressed emotions and all that. Like, as a female, I can more easily. I often say that you need to feel in order to heal.
Mm-hmm.
And as a woman, I am, in terms of society, this gets into whole like, men aren't allowed to feel shit, like,
Yeah.
um, and women are emotional and all that. So there are those biases
Mm-hmm.
to get around. Um, but also in terms of like hormones, I'm more easily able to feel emotions.
Mm-hmm.
So I have healed a lot of stuff in my past, by transitioning.
Okay.
Uh, but
Can I offer like like a little kind of uh I don't even know what the word would be. It's just another possibility, another option, let's just say another option, because I believe that we come in here choosing our body, right? We choose the body that we want to come in and experience as. I have actually come in to this world usually as a male. And I chose to come in as a female to get more acquainted with the feminine energies. And this is by no means trying to say that, you chose the wrong path or anything like that. Not at all. But I think we have options. Like, I feel like our life is like a choose your own adventure kind of book, and you get to choose. I don't think your full destiny is set in stone. I think there are certain things that you're going to have to face and go through that you've, kind of preordained for yourself coming into this lifetime. But I also think that, we have free will, and we have free will to choose how we want to experience anything or move through anything. Do you feel like there's another timeline or a reality where you chose to stay in a male body and learn to open up your heart and learn how to feel as a male?
Of course. I mean, I believe in the multiverse theory, so
Yeah.
anything is possible.
Yeah. Because I feel like, anything is possible. And again, that's not to say to judge your choice whatsoever. I just think it's important to understand that, whatever we're choosing in this life, and that goes for any choice that we're making in our life, that we're going to make the choice based off of what we're feeling is best for us in that moment, and how we're wanting to direct our life. And some of us may not face some of the really difficult challenges that are ahead of us, and some of us may. It doesn't mean the journey's any better or less important. It's just how we're choosing to navigate it and experience the life that you want. And I would say that I don't think there's anything easy about making the choice that you made. It's a very difficult process, and I can see that you're up against a lot. Like, we're having this conversation because you're misunderstood, and people are making a lot of generalizations about you, and it's not fair because they don't even know who you are.
Exactly. And towards that, I would say that, people tend to think of trans as, we're like perverts and groomers and predators. Like, no. Like, speaking in purely statistical terms, my tongue has such a hard time with that word. But in purely statistical terms, cisgender, and again, that is not a slur. That is just a term for the opposite of trans. It's based in Latin, it's scientific, it's not a slur. But cisgender straight males, statistically speaking, are the ones who are most at risk to abuse someone sexually. Every time you see a big human trafficking bust, it's always generally people in positions of authority, pastors, priests, police, politicians, doctors, and it's the victims are generally female, and they were all males who were born male. Well, almost all, but in terms of, but I am not going to suddenly say that we should ban all biological males from public spaces and having access to children, because I believe in treating people as individuals and not their demographic.
No, I think and this is also a very sensitive topic, as very sensitive for me, because you are, like how involved I am in the whole human sex trafficking, child sex trafficking, all of that. That is my number one, like, core mission, that if there's anything I'm going to stand behind and support, it's that. And, I think because what we're seeing is we are seeing a lot of hypersexualization with our children in classrooms, in libraries, with drag drag queens and that sort, but it doesn't necessarily mean though that they're transgender. They might be, but to me, it's not even about the drag or that. It's about the sexualization. And whether it's coming from anyone, it doesn't matter who it is. It's just absolutely is inexplicably like, I just don't think that should be allowed at all to be anywhere near our children. And I think it's totally okay to have a conversation where, you can say, oh, like, for instance, if I had a child and, you are meeting my child and I say, oh, this is Laina, and, if it ever came up that it needed to be said that, you were a man and now you're a woman, like, then that could have the conversation. But I don't see why that needs to be put in front of a child, like almost like it's got to be kind of forced. I think it should be something that naturally comes up in conversation. And if there's an inquisition, then I think let's talk about it, like totally fine. But this idea of, I think what happens is when we talk about this fear is that people are afraid that the children are not protected. So what is kind of your response to all of that?
Well, first of all, I was never a man. I never understood men, even when I was in real life.
Yeah.
But I think in terms of the drag conversation, well, I think, first of all, it's important to make a distinction between drag kings and queens and transgender people.
Yes.
Drag is just adults who like to play dress up, basically. Trans is something different. But I think also that drag is very misunderstood. A lot of these like drag queen story hours, like it's not sexual. They're fully clothed. They're not, there are a lot of lies out there about drag queens performing, shall we say, adult shows in front of children. I don't think there's a single instance that can be vetted and confirmed as that has actually happened like that.
Well, I mean, how can you say a single instance can't be vetted? Like, when there's clearly videos of children and very sexual dancing being done in front of them by drag queens or drag kings in these libraries or classrooms, like there's actual video of it. So how do you say that that's not happening? Like, I could understand how you might say that it's not every drag king or queen that's doing that, but there are instances where it is. And so how do you kind of make that leap?
I haven't seen those videos. In terms of video or photographic evidence, that is a very thorny issue in itself, because there is a lot of AI technology that can, and video and photo manipulation technology that can make it seem like something is happening when actually it is not. I don't know. I haven't seen the video, and again, I'm not an expert in like sort of digital analysis, so I wouldn't be able to tell if it was AI or not. But I would say that if it is real, then that is highly inappropriate. I don't think we should be teaching kids about sex whatsoever. Not until, they're old enough to understand these things.
Yeah, there shouldn't be any sexualization. I know, I know it's happening. Tim Ballard, who I have deep respect for his mission with Operation Underground Railroad, has shared that this is something that he finds, that there's sexualization with books that are being introduced to children in the classroom and hypersexualization that way too. And so it is happening, but I also would understand that there are people who are, dressing up in drag and maybe fully clothed. And it's just, this may sound so ignorant, and I apologize if I'm not meaning to offend, but I don't see the difference between that and a clown. Like, in a sense of, a child, as long as there's no sexualization in the midst, like, I just don't think that that's appropriate at all. Like, I just don't think that should be happening in any classroom. And so, or anywhere that there's children involved. And that's something that I absolutely will never budge on. But like you said, you also think it's absolutely inappropriate. So again, though, it's hard because, you're right. There is AI. There's a lot of like deep fake videos and things like that. And it's very difficult to know what's real, what's not. But at the end of the day, I would err more on the side of caution for the children's sake than the adult's sake. And that's just my personal opinion on how I would do that and honor it. But I don't feel, though, that it's necessary to, again, use a blanket to blanket statement every single person who's, a drag king or drag queen, because I know people who are then they're great people, like they're super fun and good souls, would never do that to children. And so I think what we're coming up against is, you see instances like that, it's very triggering. That, I think, is one of the most triggering things for anyone, is to see like a child being sexualized in some way. And so it's easy for the human mind to be like, to see what was the cause. Okay, that's wrong. So all people like that are wrong, and we kind of can't do that. We just got to get away, like, just remove the sexualization, like, just not allowed, and if you kind of go from it from that point of view, then it's okay, whoever's there. It's just what's appropriate and what's not appropriate for children has to really be outlined.
Yeah. And again, in terms of this topic, there is a lot of double standards. So how is, diagnosing with the proper protocols, trans kids and allowing them to transition lest they, commit suicide? How is that not appropriate for some people? And yet beauty pageants for toddlers where they're wearing these skimpy bikinis, how is that appropriate?
Yeah, I would agree with you. I don't
Yeah,
think it's appropriate. I don't think, little girls who are 5 years old wearing like full face makeup and all of that, I don't think that's appropriate, but again, like, it's a very nuanced topic, and you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. There is like some double standards there. Like putting a child in a bikini and sexualizing them by putting makeup and doing their hair for the sake of a pageant, I don't think is good either.
exactly.
Yeah. No, I would agree with you there.
Yeah. And again, with the double standard, there's a lot of just like double standards in terms of trans misogyny. That is to say, the hatred of trans women. Because trans men do not get nearly the amount of hate that trans women get. We're like society's whipping girl for every problem right now, basically.
Do you think, and this is just what instantly comes to my mind, and I could be completely way off, but do you think it's because the man, just in general, not all men, but a man might be more triggered by a trans woman than a female would be by a man? Like, and it comes from the sense of being comfortable, like, in your body, but like also, like, men don't get to explore their emotions and don't get to communicate and as freely, and so like there's a lot of suppressed internal stuff going on within a man, not all men, but in general, like, and so do you think that might be one of the factors?
Well, again, I am not a man. I have never understood them. But I do think that there is a lot of, in terms of my transition, I do believe that most men aren't aware of just how patriarchal our society is in terms of our attitudes toward gender. and in terms of the dynamics between men and women. As you know, after my transition, there's a very noticeable difference in how people of both genders relate to me. Women are definitely tend to be more open with me, and men, I do tend to notice their gazes a lot more. So yeah, it can feel very unsafe for me to be around men.
Yep. And it's, and do you mean that just as like, because they know you're a trans woman, or is it just because you're like, as a woman?
It could be both. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, from a woman's standpoint, I was gonna say, welcome to the club. It's something that a lot of men will never really understand. And, it's to some degree, I can understand that they would never understand that they're not a woman. Like they're just not going to know what it's like to be in our body and go through. Like I literally had a guy catcall me today, just going to the bank, to the ATM. And I'm just like, oh, God, really? And it's just, it's even like, I remember when, but on the flip side, what's really cool is like, I remember when Beverly was on the show, she was talking about how she really saw how men weren't given this opportunity to express themselves. And like, she described it as, men must feel like they're trapped inside a burning building with no sight of door to go through. And she really started to have empathy for the man, which I thought was really cool. And I think that was a really cool insight that maybe we wouldn't as women really understand if we didn't have someone who was in a female body who then was transitioning to a male, but then decided to transition like back, like I think, that in itself was an invaluable piece of information that for me, and I'll just speak for myself, I found that highly intriguing and wonderful to try to kind of get that perspective. And so I think that when it comes to understanding this topic, so much more deeply, is that we have to have more conversations like this one, where there's, again, I don't feel like you're trying to, make me believe something. And I hope you don't feel like I'm trying to make you believe one thing or another. I have deep respect for you and your journey. And I think what's been really, a blessing for me is having some trans clients to help them through their healing, doing inner child work with them, and really helping me kind of understand and see the actual individual and understand that we all have our own trauma. We all have stuff that we're going through. And my heart just opens up so much more the more that I get to know someone. And that goes for anyone. It doesn't matter what gender you are, but the more someone opens up and gets vulnerable and you hear what they've been through, it's so difficult to not be humanized, like to not go through that humanizing experience. And so I think there's a lot here that I hope the audience is definitely receiving. I hope that there's a lot of positivity received out of this. I'm sure some people are going to be triggered. That's to be expected, and if you are triggered, it's okay. Like all I would say is sit with that trigger and really understand where it's coming from, but not being able to have a conversation much like how we are is only going to keep that trigger active and continue to be triggered.
Yeah, totally. I think they're a big part of the way that we learn and grow and process things is by facing our triggers and by learning our own internal workings, in order to, well, as they say, know thyself, and in order to not be affected by that external stimulus in a negative way. Just like take it for what it is.
Yeah.
Don't try to filter it through perceptual distortions. Take people and situations for what they are, not, again, contextualize. There are certain scenarios where contextualization is appropriate. But again, there are instances where we tend to over contextualize, and we filter things through the lenses of our own biases. So yeah.
Before we kind of close this off, I do want to give you an opportunity to communicate and express, share, an issue that you've been facing when it comes to polarizing viewpoints that has affected you and is hurtful to you, that you would like to kind of get your side of the story kind of communicated beyond what we've already discussed.
Well, this is a personal topic for me. I have lost friends who are very dear to me due to the polarization. And also in terms of just general society and the situation right now, I think that we are at risk for civil war and potential genocide. And that's, my own fears around the topic. I do think we're headed for a better timeline than that, but there is still a risk.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I've been very affected by this topic personally, and I just wish that people would stop seeing me as, a threat, and start seeing me as an individual who deserves to follow her own path to happiness.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you. And I think, losing friends because of certain, like, just who you are, like, unapologetically who you are, this is who I am. And, I think that's something a lot of us can relate to, that's something that's very relatable. However, obviously, the threat of genocide is not something I can relate to. I don't have any fear of that whatsoever. And so that's a big thing that I think is important to understand, because that takes us back to this idea of, Hitler and the Jews, and Nazi Germany, and like what that was like for them. And you even like have these survivors who have spoken through and shared, and that trauma is sent through the generations, in the upcoming generations. It's passed on through the DNA, through the bloodlines. And so it always seems that maybe within all of our lifetimes that there's always going to be someone that we decide to choose, like, as not fit for society, like, you don't deserve to be here, and that's just a horrible, trait of our humanity, I would say. That's one that I would love for us to overcome and not feel like we need to go there. But again, I will say it comes from the fear of the unknown. And the only way that you can understand something or know something better is be willing to go into the places that feel really dark for you and gather the knowledge that you need to and confront it, face it. But do so not from a place where you feel like you need to be at war with it, because when you're at war with your own darkness, it's not a win-win situation ever. And it's not a win-lose situation ever, like it's just a lose situation. And so you have to always confront your darkness with this surrender approach, right? Like this approach of surrender, softening, and saying, you know what? I don't know what I don't know. And show me what I don't know that I'm ready to know. And I think that's something that that is something that all of us need to understand. Like when I think about even, when you do a plant medicine journey, listen, you're not in control of your mind. You're not in control of your body. Like you're surrendering. But if you try to fight with your mind, like, I don't want to see that. I don't want to see that. You're going to have a very difficult journey. It's going to be a really bad experience. But what I've always told myself, every time I start to see something that's a little bit scary, I say, okay, I know I'm safe. and I know I'm okay. And whatever I am seeing right now, it is just another extension of me that is something I don't understand and I'm in fear of. So show me this part of me that I need to see. And I think that goes for our society, that we're all representing, different parts of ourselves, extensions that we just don't understand, or that maybe there's parts of us we don't like on ourselves. And then we project that onto another, because it's a lot easier. And so I think that, softening the hearts, surrendering to this need to believe that you've got it all figured out, surrendering to the concept of, I don't know what I don't know, and be willing to know what I don't know, So,
Exactly.
yeah. And I think that's a place where and I do believe that we're heading in that direction, but of course that doesn't mean it's not going to come without a fight. There's going to be people who are kicking and screaming, but eventually, like with anything, there's going to be a tipping point. And does that mean the tipping point's going to happen in the next few years? And probably not. But I think that we're going to get really close to a tipping point. I think that, as we start to really look at what the real issues are that are really scaring people and come to an understanding, like, how do we honor everyone? How do we honor everyone? Like when I think about even like the bathroom issue, right? And I think, well, maybe the solution there is just individual bathrooms, and not having communal bathrooms anymore. Like maybe that's what we have to do. And I don't know, like I'm not saying but I'm just saying or maybe you have a communal bathroom and you have some individual bathrooms, and people who don't really give a shit will go in the communal and they're cool with it. And people who like don't and aren't comfortable can be honored and feel safe and go into an individual bathroom. Like there's always ways to make something work and honor each other. It's just when we're too busy at war with one another, we're not looking for the actual solution. We're just looking to be right.
Exactly.
Right. So, well, this was a wonderful conversation, Laina. Thank you so much for reaching out to me. I know to the audience, this is something that Laina really wanted to share, and she felt very inspired to do this conversation. I feel honored to give you my platform to do so and to share your perspectives, your thoughts, and for us to even have this conversation. I hope all of you found it helpful. Please let me know in the comments. And listen, don't be a dick in the comments, okay? Like, if you don't believe in something, you don't agree with something that maybe I said or Laina said, or maybe that was agreed upon in this between both of us in this conversation, you absolutely state that in the comments, but don't be a dick about it. Be thoughtful, be intellectual, and be compassionate, because no one wants to listen to someone who's a dick. No one wants to listen to someone who's angry. It's one of those things that just instantly, it's like, I don't want to deal with that energy. So even if you have a great message, it gets lost. So be aware of that and be respectful, because I think that's just something that our society, just in general, like I think social media has become a breeding ground for all types of people, to just be completely disrespectful and total assholes. Like there's a lot of assholes out there. Yeah. So if someone would like to reach out to you, maybe there's someone who'd like to connect with you, maybe they find that you would be helpful to their journey, are you comfortable giving out an email or any contact information at all?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I can give out my email, and there are a lot of social media that I'm on, so I can send a few links your way.
Okay, so I'll leave all your social media links and an email in the description below this video or in the podcast notes for you guys just listening on the actual audio only. And Laina, thank you so much for coming on. It was such a pleasure. To my audience, I hope you enjoyed this conversation. It's definitely a sensitive one, but I know that so much of my audience is really good at staying within the heart. And the heart is kind of, the space between the polarities in many ways. And so thank you so much for your support. And guys, next week we'll be on with our full moon in Aquarius from Mary DeCina. She'll be on the show to share with you what's going down for that full moon in Aquarius. And I'm sure we're going to talk about the Lion's Gate as well. So look forward to seeing you then, and have a great week. Thanks again for joining me for another show on the Enlighten Up podcast. I love you guys so much for all of your continued support. So remember to raise your vibe, find your tribe, and be open to the infinite possibilities held in the mysteries that surround us all. Thanks again for sharing the show with your family and friends. And if you're new to the show and you need to find out more information about me, please head on over to my website, NicoleFrolick.com, where you can join my newsletter. And please follow me on Instagram, Telegram, and YouTube. Keep your light bright, and I'll see you next week.